Gary is standing in the smallest apartment he has ever seen, and the landlord is explaining that the hole in the floor is a feature. Gary lives in Troy, not the legend, the real one. A walled city on a windy hill in what is now northwest Turkey, around the year 1180 BC. Archaeologists call this version of the city Troy 7A, because the hill holds at least 9 cities stacked on top of each other like a lasagna of bad luck. Gary is not a hero. Gary is not a prince. Gary is a man who needs a place to live in the most famous real estate market in human history at the worst possible time to enter it. Because there is an army camped outside. Nobody in Troy talks about the army. Talking about the army is considered bad for property values. Here is the situation. A generation or two ago, Troy was gorgeous. Big, elegant houses, wide streets, fine imported pottery from across the sea. Then an earthquake wrecked the place, the neighbors got hostile, and everyone who lived outside the walls decided, at roughly the same moment, that they would like to live inside the walls. The city did not get bigger. The apartments got smaller. The archaeology is very clear on this. The grand old houses were chopped up into 1, 2, and 3 room units. New shacks went up against every available wall, sharing sides with the neighbors like a row of desperate townhouses. Streets narrowed, courtyards filled in, thousands of people packed onto a citadel about the size of a large shopping mall. Which brings us back to Gary, the landlord, and the hole in the floor. The landlord calls the apartment cozy. The apartment is 1/4 of what used to be somebody's dining room. Gary can touch both walls at the same time. The landlord says that this is efficient. The landlord says Gary is lucky to be seeing it at all, because a family of 6 looked at it this morning. And in the middle of the floor, there is a pit. And in the pit, there is a jar the size of Gary. This is a pithos, and it is the signature home improvement of a city expecting trouble. In this era of Troy, the floors of house after house were dug out and fitted with enormous storage jars, sunk to the rim, sealed on top with a stone slab. Grain, oil, whatever keeps. Then you put the rug back and try not to think about why you did it. One excavated house had so many jars under it that the floor gave way. It simply collapsed into its own pantry. The archaeologists found it like that 3,000 years later. A kitchen that fell into its groceries. Nobody stockpiles a year of food under the bedroom because things are going well. A city that buries its lunch is a city that has done the math on a siege. Gary asks the landlord about the army outside. The landlord says, "What army?" Gary signs the lease. Now. Gary assumes his housing crisis is a local problem. It is not. Gary's housing crisis is a matter of international diplomacy, and it has paperwork. Troy does not appear in writing in Troy. So far, the city has given archaeologists no archive of its own, but it appears in somebody else's filing cabinet. The Hittite Empire, the superpower next door in central Turkey, kept records on clay, and the records keep mentioning a vassal city in exactly Troy's corner of the map. They call it Wilusa. Around 1280 BC, a century before Gary's lease, the Hittite great king signed a formal treaty with the king of Wilusa. We still have it. 6 copies. The king of Wilusa's name was Alexandru, which sounds suspiciously like Alexandros, the other name of the prince the legends call Paris. Historians officially say this may be a coincidence. Historians unofficially raise their eyebrows. And the treaty is sworn before the gods of both sides, as was proper. One of the divine witnesses for Wilusa is a god the tablet calls Apollonius. Say it out loud. The city that legend says was defended by Apollo put a god who sounds exactly like Apollo on the signature page. There is more. Around 1250 BC, a Hittite king wrote a long, angry letter to another king across the Aegean Sea, a king of a people the Hittites called the Ahiyawa, which is, most scholars now accept, their spelling of the people we call Mycenaean Greeks. In the letter, the Hittite king mentions, in passing, that the two of them had previously come to blows over one particular city. The city was Wilusa. The great powers of the Bronze Age went to war, at least once, over Gary's zip code. It was apparently resolved. It was apparently not resolved enough. So that is the neighborhood. Meanwhile, Gary has practical problems, starting with water. A city under pressure cannot stroll to the river, so Troy has a secret. Underneath the edge of town there is a tunnel, cut 160 meters into the rock, with vertical shafts plunging down to the water table. It was carved centuries earlier, and it still works. Cool, dark, dripping, and holy. The Hittite treaty for Wilusa even swears by the sacred underground watercourse, which suggests the tunnel was famous enough to notarize. To Gary, it is mostly famous for the line. Every morning, half of Troy is queuing at the water with jugs in the dark, complaining. A sacred spring is still a Monday. Food is worse. The market has entered siege pricing. Fish from the bay, when the fishermen dare to go out. Grain measured like treasure, because it is treasure. Because everyone's actual treasure is buried under everyone's actual floor. Imported goods, the fancy Greek pottery Troy used to buy by the crate, have quietly vanished from the shelves. Trade with the people across the sea is, for some reason, experiencing disruptions. Gary attends a dinner party. This is a mistake. Hospitality in this world is not manners, it is law. A guest is sacred, a host is bound, and the whole system runs on absolutely nobody abusing it. Gary drinks from the wrong cup, and 11 people stare at him like he has burned a temple. The legends say the entire war outside started because one house guest, one time, took something that was not his. Gary would like everyone to know the cup thing was different. And then, on an ordinary day, the thing nobody talks about stops being ignorable. We do not know the date, we know the layer. Around 1180 BC, give or take, Troy 7A ends in fire. The ash in some places is a meter thick. Excavators found charred beams where roofs came down, and bronze arrowheads in the streets and walls, and sling stones gathered in piles like someone stacked ammunition and then had no time to use it. They found people, skeletons in the streets, unburied or buried in a hurry, which is not how anyone chose to be treated. Cities that fall peacefully do not look like this. Something came over those walls, and it was not a rumor. Did 1,000 Greek ships do it? The honest answer is that the ash does not say. It could be the Greeks of the angry letters. It could be raiders or neighbors, or the general collapse that was, in those exact decades, eating every great city in the eastern Mediterranean one by one. The Bronze Age was ending. Troy was simply on time. Gary's lease did not cover this. The deposit, we can assume, was not returned. But here is the epilogue. People crawled back, they patched the walls and lived in the ruins, poorer, for another century or so. And 400 years later, a Greek poet took the old stories about the old war at the old city and organized them into the most successful pieces of entertainment in human history. He mentioned a horse. Archaeologists, for the record, have never found the horse. They found the city. It is still there. You can visit Gary's apartment, more or less. It is a low stone outline on a windy hill in Turkey, with the pit for the jar still in the floor, which makes Gary's apartment the only rental in history that was too small, had a hole in the floor, sat next to a war, and still became the most famous address on Earth. His landlord always said the place would appreciate. Gary hates that he was right. Gary's troubles are not confined to one century. History is long, and Gary lives in all of it.